The night Celeste Arden signed her divorce papers, her husband was upstairs laughing with another woman. By morning, his bank accounts would be frozen. By the end of the week, his empire would collapse. And by the time he realized what she'd done, Celeste would already be gone, reborn as someone he could never touch again. This is the story of a woman who learned to survive in silence, and the moment she decided to stop surviving and start living. If you want to see how far revenge can take you when you've spent years preparing for it, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain came down in sheets the night Celeste Arden became nobody. She sat in the leather chair across from Martin Greaves, her divorce attorney, watching his mouth move without hearing the words. The conference room smelled like old coffee and expensive cologne. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Boston blurred into streaks of amber and red, the city bleeding into itself the way everything did when you stopped trying to hold it together. Martin slid 3 documents across the mahogany table. His pen followed, heavy and cold. "Initial here, here, and here," he said. "Full signature at the bottom." Celeste picked up the pen. It weighed more than she expected. Everything did lately. She signed her name in the spaces Martin indicated. Celeste Olivia Arden. 3 times. Each stroke felt like erasing herself, letter by letter, until only the ink remained as proof she'd ever existed at all. "That's it," Martin said, gathering the papers with practiced efficiency. "You're officially separated. The divorce will finalize in 6 months pending the settlement negotiations." Celeste nodded. Her throat felt tight, but not from sadness, from something else. Something that had been building for years in the spaces between her ribs, pressing outward, demanding room. "Thank you, Martin. I'm sorry it came to this, Celeste." His voice carried the rehearsed sympathy of a man who'd watched 100 marriages dissolve in this same room. "If there's anything else you need, there isn't." She stood, smoothed her black dress, picked up her purse, and walked toward the door without looking back at the table where she'd just signed away 8 years of her life. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. 43 floors. She counted everyone. By the time the doors opened into the lobby, she'd stopped shaking. The rain hit her the moment she stepped outside. Cold, sharp, real. She didn't have an umbrella, didn't bother calling for the car. She just walked, heels clicking against wet pavement, letting the rain soak through her coat and dress until she couldn't tell where the water ended and her skin began. Boston at night was a city that belonged to people who knew how to take things. Celeste had spent 8 years watching her husband take credit, take space, take her silence and mistake it for surrender. But Damien Vale didn't know what silence really meant. He didn't know that silence was a language all its own, spoken fluently by women who'd learned to survive in rooms where their words didn't matter. He didn't know that while he was busy taking, she'd been busy learning. Learning how money moved through invisible channels. Learning which lawyers couldn't be bought and which ones could. Learning exactly how much leverage it took to bring down a man who believed himself untouchable. She walked 6 blocks before she stopped in front of a corner bar she'd never noticed before. Red neon sign, cracked windows, the kind of place that didn't care who you were or who you used to be. Inside, the air smelled like cigarettes and old wood. 3 people sat at the bar, hunched over their drinks like they were protecting them from the world. The bartender, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and hands that looked like they'd seen real work, glanced up when Celeste walked in. "You lost?" "No." Celeste slid onto a stool at the end of the bar. "Whiskey. Neat." The bartender studied her for a long moment, took in the designer dress, the soaked hair, the diamond wedding band Celeste hadn't taken off yet. "Rough night." Something like that. The whiskey appeared in front of her. Celeste drank it in one swallow, felt it burn all the way down, and ordered another. "You want to talk about it?" the bartender asked. "No." "Good. I hate listening." Celeste almost smiled. Almost. She stayed at that bar for 3 hours, drank 4 whiskeys, watched the rain turn to sleet against the windows. Thought about Damien in their penthouse suite, his penthouse suite now, probably laughing with Victoria Chen, his latest distraction. 26 years old. Marketing executive. Long black hair and legs that went on forever. The kind of woman who looked good in photographs and knew it. Damien thought Celeste didn't know about Victoria. Damien was an idiot. She knew about Victoria. She knew about Madison before Victoria, and Emma before Madison, and the cocktail waitress from the Copley Plaza whose name Damien probably never bothered learning. She knew because she'd made it her business to know, because information was the only currency that mattered when you were married to a man who traded in power. Around midnight, Celeste's phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. Finally, she looked. 17 missed calls from Damien. 23 text messages. She opened the first one. "Where are you?" Then the second. "Celeste, answer your phone." The third. "This is childish." She scrolled through the rest. They followed a predictable pattern: confusion, irritation, anger, false concern. By message 23, he'd settled on condescension. "I know you're upset, but disappearing won't solve anything. Come home so we can talk like adults." Celeste deleted every message without responding. Then she took off her wedding ring. It slid off easily, too easily. She'd lost weight over the past year, stopped eating the elaborate meals their private chef prepared, started surviving on coffee and the gnawing hunger that felt more honest than pretending to be full. She set the ring on the bar between her empty glass and her phone. The bartender noticed. "Hell of a tip." "It's not a tip." "Then what is it?" Celeste looked at the ring, platinum band, 2-carat diamond, bought by a man who'd spent more time picking it out than he'd ever spent trying to understand the woman who wore it. "Evidence?" she said finally. "Of what?" "That I used to be someone else." The bartender refilled her glass without being asked. "You got somewhere to go tonight?" "Yes." "You sure? Because you look like someone who's about to make a bad decision." Celeste picked up the fresh whiskey, held it up to the dim light, watched the liquid catch and hold the glow. "The bad decision already happened," she said. "This is just the aftermath." She drank, put money on the bar, more than enough to cover her tab and the ring that wasn't a tip. Then she walked back out into the rain. The townhouse on Beacon Hill stood dark and silent when she arrived. Damien was still at the penthouse in the Seaport District, the one with the view of the harbor and the private elevator, and the kind of security that made normal people feel small. Celeste had kept this place. Not because she wanted it, but because it was the one thing Damien had never cared about. He'd bought it early in their marriage, back when he was building his empire and needed an address that sounded like old money. But once he had the penthouse, once he had the real power and the real view, he'd forgotten about this place, which made it perfect. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house smelled stale, unused. She flipped on the lights and looked around at furniture covered in white sheets, at walls that held nothing but shadows. This was where she'd spent the last 6 months planning. She walked upstairs to the bedroom she'd converted into an office. 3 filing cabinets, 2 laptops, a wall covered in papers, documents, spreadsheets, every piece of evidence she'd gathered over the past 3 years. Bank statements showing transfers to offshore accounts. Emails between Damien and his business partners discussing deals that skirted the edge of legal. Text messages with timestamps that proved he'd been lying about business trips that were really weekends with women whose names he'd forget by Monday. And at the center of it all, the document that would destroy him completely, proof that he'd been embezzling from his own investors, siphoning money into personal accounts through a web of shell corporations so complex he'd assume no one would ever untangle it. But Celeste had untangled it. She'd spent 3 years learning forensic accounting from online courses she'd taken in secret. Taught herself to track money the way some people tracked weather patterns, following the flow from one account to another, watching the numbers tell stories Damien thought he'd buried. Tomorrow morning at 9, her lawyer would deliver copies of everything to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, and 3 journalists she'd carefully cultivated over the past year. By noon, Damien's accounts would be frozen. By evening, the story would break across every major news outlet in New England. By the time he understood what was happening, it would already be too late. Celeste sat down at her desk, opened her laptop, pulled up the document she'd been working on for the past month. A detailed letter explaining everything she'd discovered, written in her own words, describing exactly how she'd watched her husband build an empire on fraud and lies, while she smiled beside him at charity galas and pretended not to notice. She read through it one last time, made a few small edits, added a final paragraph. "I am not doing this for revenge. I am doing this because silence makes you complicit, and I refuse to be complicit anymore. I refused to protect a man who spent years teaching me that my voice didn't matter. I refused to stand by while he hurts more people the way he hurt me, not physically, but through erosion, through the slow grinding down of everything that made me believe I deserved better. This is not about justice. This is about survival. And I choose to survive. She saved the document, attached it to an email, typed in the addresses of every recipient who needed to see it. Her finger hovered over the send button. This was the moment. Once she pressed it, there was no going back, no negotiating, no second chances. Damien would know she'd been planning this all along, that every smile she'd given him over the past 3 years had been a mask hiding something he'd never suspected she was capable of. He would lose everything, and she would disappear. Celeste pressed send. The email left her outbox with a soft whoosh that sounded like a door closing. She sat back in her chair, waited for the fear to come, waited for the doubt, waited for the voice in her head that had spent 8 years telling her she was overreacting, being dramatic, making too much of things that didn't matter. The voice didn't come. Instead, she felt light, hollow, like she'd been carrying something heavy for so long she'd forgotten what her body felt like without the weight. She stood, walked to the window, looked out at Boston spreading in the darkness below, all those lights burning in all those windows where other people were living lives she'd never know. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Damien. She let it ring, once, twice, 5 times, until it stopped. Then it started again immediately. This time she answered, "Where the hell are you?" Damien's voice came through tight with barely controlled anger. "I've been calling for hours." "I know. Then why didn't you answer?" "Because I didn't want to talk to you." Silence. He wasn't used to her talking like this. Wasn't used to her saying what she meant without softening it first, without apologizing for taking up space with her words. "Celeste?" His voice shifted into the tone he used when he was trying to sound reasonable. "I know you're upset about the divorce, but I'm not upset about the divorce." "Then what's this about?" "It's about me being tired, Damien, tired of pretending, tired of playing the role you wrote for me, tired of being the quiet wife who doesn't ask questions." "You're not making sense." "I'm making perfect sense. You're just not listening, but that's nothing new." "Is this about Victoria?" He said the name like it was meaningless, like she was meaningless. "Because if you're upset about, this isn't about Victoria. This is about you. About who you are when you think no one's watching. About what you've built and how you built it." Another pause. Longer this time. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, could picture him in the penthouse, standing by those floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the same city from a different angle. "What are you talking about?" "You'll find out tomorrow." "Find out what?" "Everything." She hung up. The phone rang again immediately. She turned it off, dropped it on the desk. Then she walked to the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out the suitcase she'd packed 2 weeks ago. 2 changes of clothes, toiletries, her laptop, the documents that proved who she really was before she became Celeste Arden, before she became the quiet wife, before she learned to disappear. She looked at the birth certificate she'd retrieved from storage last month. The name printed there in clean black ink, Seraphine Marie Laurent. She'd been born with that name, grown up with it, left it behind when she married Damien because he'd said it sounded too French, too pretentious, too much for a woman who was supposed to be his partner, not his competition. But Seraphine Laurent hadn't been competition. Seraphine Laurent had been the heir to a fortune Damien never knew existed. Her grandfather, Henri Laurent, had built an empire in the 1960s through quiet investments in shipping, real estate, and early tech companies. He'd died when Seraphine was 12, leaving everything to her in a trust she couldn't access until she turned 35. By the time she married Damien at 26, she'd almost forgotten about it, buried under years of being told money didn't matter as much as love. She'd turned 35 6 months ago. The same week she'd started planning this. The trust had been worth $43 million. Small by Damien's standards, but large enough to matter. Large enough to give her options. Large enough to let her disappear and rebuild herself into something he could never touch. She'd spent the past 6 months quietly moving that money into accounts Damien knew nothing about, working with lawyers and financial advisors who understood exactly what she was trying to do and why she needed to do it invisibly. By tomorrow afternoon, when his accounts froze and his empire started crumbling, she'd be in Portland, Maine, staying in a small bed and breakfast under her real name, waiting for the news to break. And after that, she'd figure out who Seraphine Laurent was supposed to be. Celeste took one last look around the townhouse, at the walls that had witnessed her transformation from the woman who'd signed divorce papers in silence to the woman who'd finally learned to speak in a language powerful men understood. Then she picked up her suitcase and walked out the door without locking it behind her. The drive to Portland took 2.5 hours through rain that turned to snow somewhere around Portsmouth. Celeste, Seraphine, drove with both hands on the wheel, watching the highway stretch ahead of her like a line someone had drawn between who she used to be and who she was becoming. The bed and breakfast sat 3 blocks from the harbor, a Victorian house painted pale blue with white trim and flower boxes that would bloom in spring. The owner, a woman named Margaret with kind eyes and flower on her apron, showed her to a room on the 2nd floor overlooking the water. "You here on business or pleasure?" Margaret asked as she set fresh towels on the bed. "Neither, both." "I'm not sure yet," Margaret smiled. "Sometimes the best trips are the ones where you don't know what you're looking for until you find it." After Margaret left, Seraphine stood at the window and watched snow fall over the harbor. The water looked black and endless, moving in ways she couldn't predict, following rules she didn't understand. She thought about Damien waking up tomorrow morning, checking his phone, seeing the news alerts, calling his lawyer, his accountant, his business partners, realizing slowly that everything he'd built was collapsing and there was nothing he could do to stop it. She thought about him remembering her, not as the quiet wife, not as the woman who'd signed divorce papers without crying, but as the woman who'd learned to be quiet for a reason. Her phone, the new one she'd bought yesterday, the one Damien didn't have the number to, buzzed with a text from Martin Greaves. "Documents delivered. SEC opened an investigation this morning. News breaks at noon." "You did the right thing." Seraphine looked at the message for a long time. The right thing. She wasn't sure about that. She wasn't sure there was a right thing when you spent 3 years planning to destroy someone's life, even if that someone had spent 8 years teaching you that your life didn't matter as much as his. But maybe it didn't need to be right. Maybe it just needed to be done. She turned off the phone, climbed into bed fully clothed, closed her eyes, and waited for morning. Damien Vale's empire collapsed exactly the way Seraphine knew it would. Fast, brutal, and public. By noon, every major news outlet in Boston was running the story. Former Wall Street darling arrested on charges of securities fraud, embezzlement, and investor deception. Accounts frozen. Assets seized, partners scrambling to distance themselves from the wreckage. By evening, his face was everywhere. Not the polished publicity photos he'd carefully curated over the years, but the mugshot from his arrest. Disheveled, exhausted, scared. Seraphine watched the news coverage from her room at the bed and breakfast, sat on the edge of the bed with her laptop open, clicking through article after article, reading the quotes from investors who'd lost everything, from business partners who claimed they'd never suspected, from federal prosecutors who promised justice. None of the articles mentioned her by name. That had been part of the deal she'd made with the journalists, her cooperation in exchange for anonymity. They'd honored it. Every story referred to her only as Vale's estranged wife or a confidential source. Her role in bringing him down remained invisible, the way she'd been invisible throughout their entire marriage. The difference was that now she'd chosen the invisibility. Now she controlled it. Her phone rang. The old phone. The one she'd left turned off in her suitcase. She turned it back on this morning, curious to see how many messages would come through. 73 missed calls, over 100 text messages, 12 voicemails, all from Damien. She listened to the first voicemail. "Celeste, I know you're angry, but you need to call me back right now. Something's happened, something bad. I think someone's trying to destroy me and I need your help. Please, call me." The second voicemail came 6 hours later. "It was you, wasn't it? You did this. You gave them everything. How could you? After everything I've done for you, after everything I've given you, how could you betray me like this?" The third voicemail was just breathing, heavy, ragged, the sound of a man coming apart. Seraphine deleted all of them without listening to the rest. She almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The way you might feel sorry for a drowning man who'd spent years pushing other people underwater to keep himself afloat. But sympathy was a luxury she couldn't afford, not when she'd spent 3 years earning the right to breathe. She closed the laptop, walked downstairs, found Margaret in the kitchen making bread, her hands deep in dough that smelled like yeast and honey. "You hungry?" Margaret asked. "Starving." "Good. Sit down. I'll make you something real." Seraphine sat at the small kitchen table and watched Margaret work. There was something hypnotic about it. The rhythm of her hands, the way she shaped the dough with practiced confidence, the certainty that came from doing something you'd done 1,000 times before and knowing you'd do it right. "You running from something?" Margaret asked without looking up. "Yes." "Bad man or bad situation?" "Both. Same person." Margaret nodded like she'd heard that story before. "You safe now?" "I think so." "You think so or you know so?" Seraphine considered the question. "I don't know if safe is something you ever really know. I think it's something you have to keep choosing over and over until it starts to feel real." Margaret smiled. "Smart girl." She put a plate in front of Seraphine, fresh bread, butter, honey, soft cheese that tasted like salt and cream. Real food, the kind you made with your hands instead of ordering from restaurants that charged by the syllable. "What's your name?" Margaret asked. "Your real one, not the one you're using." "Seraphine." "Pretty name. French?" "My grandfather was from Lyon." "He teach you how to run?" Seraphine looked up sharply. "What?" "From bad men." Margaret sat down across from her. "That's what you're doing, isn't it? Running?" "I thought I was." But maybe I'm not running. Maybe I'm just going somewhere he can't follow." Margaret reached across the table and squeezed her hand once, brief and warm. "Then you're not running, honey. You're leaving. There's a difference." Seraphine stayed in Portland for 2 weeks. She spent her days walking along the frozen waterfront, learning the rhythm of a city that didn't care who she used to be. She bought coffee from shops where nobody recognized her name. She ate breakfast at diners where the waitresses called everyone Han, and refilled your cup without asking. She cut her hair, not dramatically, not as some symbolic gesture of transformation. She just walked into a salon one afternoon and told the stylist to take off 4 inches and make it look like she'd made the decision herself instead of having it decided for her. When she looked in the mirror afterward, she barely recognized herself. She looked awake. On the 15th day, her lawyer called. "Damien's pleading guilty," Martin said. "His lawyers advised him to take the deal. 20 years, eligible for parole in 12. 20 years, Seraphine repeated. "He asked about you, wanted to know if you'd come visit him before sentencing." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I'd pass along the message. I did not tell him you'd already made it clear you have no interest in seeing him again." "Thank you, Martin." "Seraphine," he paused. "Are you okay?" She looked out the window of her room at the harbor stretching black and cold under afternoon clouds. "I don't know what okay feels like anymore," she said honestly, "but I think I'm closer to it than I've been in 8 years. That's something. It's everything." After she hung up, she sat on the edge of the bed and cried. Not from sadness, not from relief, just from the exhaustion of carrying something heavy for so long and finally being allowed to put it down. That night, she booked a flight back to Boston, not to the Beacon Hill townhouse, not to any place Damien would think to look for her, to a small apartment in the North End she'd purchased under her real name, using money from the trust, in a building owned by a corporation that couldn't be traced back to her unless you knew exactly where to look. She was going home, not to the home she'd shared with Damien, but to the one she'd built for herself while he wasn't paying attention. To the home where Seraphine Laurent could finally figure out who she was supposed to be now that she'd stopped being Celeste Arden. The plane landed in Boston on a Tuesday afternoon under skies that looked like bruised metal. Seraphine took a cab from the airport to her new apartment, riding through streets she knew by heart, but was seeing for the first time as someone new. The apartment building stood tucked between a bakery and a small Italian restaurant on a narrow street that smelled like bread and garlic and winter. 3 stories. Red brick. Fire escapes climbing the side like iron veins. She unlocked the door to her unit on the 3rd floor and stepped inside. Empty. Clean. Hers. She'd furnished it sparsely over the past 3 months. A bed, a couch, a desk. The windows overlooked the harbor in the distance, but from here the view felt earned rather than bought. She'd worked for this view, planned for it, survived to see it. She set her suitcase down and walked to the window. Boston glittered under the afternoon light, all steel and glass and old brick holding each other up the way cities do when they've survived long enough to forget why they were built in the first place. Somewhere in this city, Damien was sitting in a cell waiting to be sentenced. Somewhere in this city, women were still learning how to survive in rooms built by powerful men. Somewhere in this city, someone was signing divorce papers in silence and believing it meant they'd failed. Seraphine pressed her forehead against the cold window glass. She'd destroyed her husband's empire, watched him fall, walked away while he was still falling. And now, standing alone in an empty apartment overlooking a city that didn't know her name, she finally understood what Martin had said on the phone. That's something. It's everything. Her phone buzzed. New number, unknown caller. She almost didn't answer. But something in her, the part that had learned to survive by paying attention to details other people missed, made her pick up. Hello? Seraphine Laurent? The voice was male, deep, careful. Who is this? My name is Roman Castelli. I'd like to meet with you about a business opportunity that might interest you. Are you available tomorrow evening for dinner? How did you get this number? The same way you got the documents that destroyed Damien Vale's empire. I pay attention to people who are good at being invisible. Seraphine's heart kicked hard against her ribs. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. His voice carried no threat, just certainty. 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Il Mercato on Hanover Street. Come alone, or don't come at all. Either way, I think you'll regret not hearing what I have to say. The line went dead. Seraphine stood holding the phone, her reflection staring back at her from the darkening window. She should ignore the call, delete the number, disappear deeper. But something about the way Roman Castelli had said her name, like he knew exactly who she was and what she'd done and wasn't afraid of either, made her curious. Made her want to know what kind of man paid attention to women who'd learned to be invisible. Mitam. Seraphine didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the North End filtering through her walls. Car horns, distant laughter, someone's television playing too loud 3 floors down. The city breathed around her, alive and indifferent, while she tried to figure out what kind of mistake she was about to make. Roman Castelli. She'd heard the name before, whispered in corners at charity galas, mentioned in passing by Damien's business associates with the kind of careful respect people reserved for men who could hurt them. But she'd never paid attention because Roman Castelli existed in a world that had nothing to do with her, the old money world, the real power world, the world where fortunes were built on handshakes and silence rather than press releases and quarterly earnings reports. Now he knew her name, her real name, and he wanted to meet. At 4 in the morning, she gave up on sleep, got out of bed, made coffee in the small kitchen that still smelled like fresh paint, stood at the window watching the harbor emerge from darkness, the water turning from black to gray to something almost blue as dawn broke over the city. She could ignore the invitation, throw away the number, pretend the call never happened, but she'd spent 8 years pretending and she was done with it. At 6:45 the next evening, she stood in front of her closet trying to decide who she was supposed to be. The black dress felt too formal. The jeans felt too casual. Everything else felt like a costume she'd worn for someone else's benefit. Finally, she settled on dark pants, a cream silk blouse, and the cashmere coat she'd bought last week because it was hers and no one had told her what to buy. She left her hair down, wore minimal makeup, put on the emerald ring her grandfather had given her when she turned 18, the one she'd kept hidden in a safe deposit box throughout her marriage because Damien said it looked cheap. It didn't look cheap, it looked like it had survived something. Il Mercato sat tucked on a side street in the North End, the kind of restaurant tourists walked past without noticing. No sign, no menu in the window, just a red door and the faint smell of garlic and wine drifting into the street. Seraphine arrived at exactly 7 o'clock. She pushed open the door and stepped into warmth. The dining room was small, maybe 15 tables, most of them full. Candlelight, low voices, the clink of silverware against good china. A man stood from a corner table when he saw her. Roman Castelli. He was older than she expected, mid-50s maybe, tall, dark hair going gray at the temples. He wore a black suit that fit him the way expensive suits did, but he wore it like he didn't care whether people noticed. His face was all sharp angles and careful stillness, the kind of face that had learned early how to hide what it was thinking. But his eyes. His eyes were the darkest brown she'd ever seen, and they watched her cross the restaurant the way a hunter watches movement in the trees, patient, alert, waiting to see what she'd do next. "Miss Laurent," he offered his hand. "Thank you for coming." His grip was firm but brief. No power games, no unnecessary holding on. "Mr. Castelli." She sat down across from him. "You have me at a disadvantage. You seem to know quite a bit about me, and I know nothing about you. Then we should fix that." He poured her wine from a bottle already open on the table, red. It smelled like earth and smoke. "What would you like to know?" "How you got my number." "I have people who are good at finding things." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I'm going to give tonight." He sipped his wine. "Ask something else." Seraphine studied him. He didn't look away, didn't smile, didn't try to charm her or put her at ease. He just waited. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "I want to offer you an opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" "The kind that might interest someone who just spent 3 years dismantling her husband's empire from the inside." The words hit like cold water. She kept her face neutral, but something in her chest tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Roman set down his glass. "Seraphine, I'm not here to threaten you. I'm not here to expose you. I'm here because I've been watching you for 6 months, and I'm impressed by what I've seen. You've been watching me. Not personally, but yes. I've had people pay attention to the interesting things happening in Damien Vale's world. The way his accounts started bleeding money in ways that didn't quite make sense. The way documents kept appearing in places they shouldn't. The way his wife, his quiet, invisible wife, suddenly had access to information she couldn't possibly have found without help. Seraphine's pulse kicked hard. "If you're trying to scare me..." "I'm not." His voice stayed level, calm. "I'm trying to hire you." She stared at him. "What?" "I have business interests that require a particular kind of attention, the kind you can't hire from consulting firms or accounting agencies. I need someone who understands how money moves when it doesn't want to be seen. Someone who knows how to be invisible in rooms full of powerful people. Someone who's proven they can burn down an empire without anyone noticing until it's already ash. You want to hire me to destroy someone. I want to hire you to help me understand my own businesses better. Where the money goes. Who's stealing? Who's lying? The same things you did for yourself, but for me." Seraphine picked up her wine, drank. The alcohol burned less than she expected. "And if I say no?" "Then you say no. I'll finish my dinner. You'll finish yours. We'll never speak again." "That's it? No threats? No leverage?" "Seraphine." Roman leaned forward slightly. Not close enough to invade her space, but close enough that she could see the lines around his eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow. "I don't need to threaten you. You're already scared enough. What I'm offering is a chance to stop being scared, to use what you learned in the worst years of your life to build something that belongs to you." "I don't need your money." "No, you don't. Your grandfather saw to that." Roman smiled for the first time, barely, just a slight pull at one corner of his mouth. "But you need purpose. You need to know that what you did to Damien wasn't just revenge, that it was practice for something bigger." The waiter appeared before she could answer. Set down plates neither of them had ordered, pasta with clams, fresh bread, olive oil that smelled like crushed herbs. After the waiter left, Roman said, "Eat, then decide." They ate in silence. The food was perfect. Simple and perfect, the way food was when someone who actually knew how to cook made it, instead of someone trying to impress you. Seraphine hadn't realized how hungry she was until she started eating and couldn't stop. Roman ate slowly, methodically, like someone who'd learned early that meals were fuel rather than pleasure, but had forgotten to change the habit once he could afford to care. "Tell me about yourself," Seraphine said finally. "What do you want to know?" "Everything you're not telling me." He set down his fork, wiped his mouth with his napkin. "I was born in the North End. Same streets you're living on now. My father ran a small import business. Legitimate, mostly. He died when I was 14. Heart attack, left my mother with 4 kids and debts he'd hidden from everyone, including himself. What did you do? I took over the business, dropped out of school, learned how to negotiate with men twice my age who thought I was easy to cheat. By the time I was 20, I'd paid off every debt and expanded into shipping. By 30, I owned half the warehouses in South Boston. By 40, I had enough money and connections that people stopped asking where either came from. And now? Now I'm 53 years old and tired of working with people who only know how to steal when they think no one's watching. I'd rather work with someone who knows how to watch. Seraphine studied him, looked for the lie, the angle, the thing he wasn't saying that would come back later and destroy her the way Damien's secrets had destroyed him. She didn't find it, but that didn't mean it wasn't there. I need time to think about this, she said. Of course. Roman pulled a card from his inside pocket. Plain white cardstock. Just a phone number. Call me when you've decided, or don't call. Either way, I meant what I said. This conversation stays between us. He stood, dropped cash on the table. More than enough to cover the meal, and then some. Thank you for coming, Seraphine. I hope you'll give me a chance to show you that not all powerful men want to own you. Some of us just want to work with you. Then he left. Seraphine sat alone at the table, holding the card, listening to her heart beat too fast in her chest. She should throw it away. She should forget this ever happened. She put the card in her purse. 3 days later, she called him. I have conditions, she said when he answered. Name them. I work alone, no partners, no team. You give me access to whatever I need and I tell you what I find. That's it. Agreed. I need complete discretion. My name doesn't appear on any documents. No one knows I'm working for you except you. Done. And I can walk away at any time. No contracts, no obligations. If I decide this isn't for me, I'm gone, and you don't follow. Silence for a moment. Then, agreed. When can you start? Tomorrow. Come to my office at 9, 47 Lewis Wharf, top floor. Security will be expecting you. He hung up before she could change her mind. The next morning, Seraphine took the T to Aquarium Station and walked along the waterfront to Lewis Wharf. The building was all steel and glass, modern in a way that felt deliberately understated. No fancy lobby, no marble floors, just clean lines and security that looked at her like they knew exactly who she was and had been told to let her through without questions. The elevator opened directly into Roman's office on the top floor. He stood at the window looking out at the harbor. Turned when he heard her. Good morning. Morning. Seraphine set her bag down, looked around. The office was sparse. A desk, 2 chairs, shelves lined with books that looked read rather than decorative. No photographs, no personal touches. Just space and light and the city spread out beyond the windows. Coffee? Roman asked. Please. He poured from a French press on the credenza, handed her a cup. Black. No sugar, exactly the way she drank it. How did you know? She asked. I pay attention. They sat on opposite sides of his desk. Roman opened a laptop, turned it toward her. These are the businesses I need you to look at. Shipping companies, real estate holdings, 3 restaurants, a hotel in Cambridge. I think someone's skimming from at least 2 of them, maybe more. I need to know who, how much, and how long it's been happening. Seraphine scrolled through the files. Spreadsheets, bank statements, transaction histories going back 5 years. This is a lot of data. I know. It's going to take time. I have time. She looked up at him. Why me? Why not hire a forensic accounting firm, someone legitimate? Because legitimate firms ask questions. They file reports. They follow procedures that leave trails I can't control. You don't. You want me to find evidence you can use without anyone knowing where it came from? Exactly. Seraphine sat back. That's illegal. So was what you did to Damien. The words hung between them. Not a threat, just a fact. That was different, she said quietly. That was personal. And this isn't? You think these people stealing from me aren't also stealing from their families? From their employees? You think the money they take doesn't hurt real people? That's not my problem. It could be. Roman leaned forward. Seraphine, I'm not asking you to do this out of charity. I'm offering you a chance to use skills most people don't know they need until it's too late. Skills that could help people who don't have the resources to protect themselves the way you protected yourself from Damien. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she wasn't some vigilante accountant who cared about justice. But the truth was, she'd spent 3 years watching numbers tell stories about how Damien hurt people, and every number had made her angrier, sharper, more determined to stop him. Maybe Roman was right. Maybe this wasn't that different. I'll need full access to everything, she said finally. Bank accounts, passwords, employee records, vendor contracts, everything. You'll have it by this afternoon. And if I find something you don't want to hear, then you tell me anyway. I hired you for the truth, not comfort. Seraphine picked up her coffee, drank. Okay, I'll do it. Roman nodded once. Good. There's a desk in the room next door. Take whatever space you need. And Seraphine? Yes? Thank you for trusting me. She almost laughed. I don't trust you. I know, but you're here anyway. That's close enough. Miskan. She found the first discrepancy 3 days later. One of Roman's shipping companies, North Atlantic Freight, showed regular payments to a vendor called Triton Maritime Services. $5,000 every month for the past 2 years. $120,000 total. But when Seraphine cross-referenced Triton Maritime with business registrations, tax filings, and corporate databases, she found nothing. No company by that name existed. The checks were being cashed, though. All of them. Through a business account at a small bank in Revere. She dug deeper. The account belonged to a man named Vincent Caro. He worked for Roman as a logistics manager, had been with the company for 8 years. Good reviews, no red flags, except he was stealing $5,000 a month and hiding it behind a fake vendor. Seraphine printed everything, walked into Roman's office without knocking. He looked up from his desk. Find something? Vincent Caro, logistics manager. He's been skimming $5,000 a month for 2 years through a shell vendor called Triton Maritime Services. She spread the documents across his desk. Bank statements, forged invoices, the paper trail that proved everything. Roman studied the pages in silence. His face didn't change. No anger, no surprise. Just that same careful stillness she'd noticed the first night at dinner. How certain are you? He asked. Completely. Any chance this is a legitimate vendor I forgot about? Zero. The company doesn't exist. The only person who's ever touched that account is Vincent Caro. Roman nodded slowly, gathered the pages, slid them into a folder. Thank you. I'll handle it from here. What are you going to do? Fire him. Report him to the authorities. Standard procedure. But something in his voice made her pause. That's not what you're going to do. No? No. You're going to do something else, something that doesn't involve the police. Roman looked at her for a long moment. Does that bother you? I don't know yet. Seraphine, I appreciate your work, but how I handle my employees is my business, not yours. She should have left it there, should have walked away and focused on the work she was being paid to do. Instead, she said, What happens to people who steal from you, Roman? They stop stealing. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you need. The way he said it, calm, final, absolute, sent something cold through her chest. Not fear exactly, but recognition. The understanding that she'd just seen a door open to a room she'd known existed but had never looked inside. I'm not going to help you hurt people, she said quietly. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to find the truth. What I do with that truth is my responsibility. And if I don't like what you do with it, then you walk away. Like you said, no contracts, no obligations. He stood, came around the desk, stopped a few feet from her. But before you decide I'm some kind of monster, ask yourself what you would have done if Damien's crimes hadn't been public enough to report. If the only way to stop him was through methods that didn't show up in court filings. Seraphine's jaw tightened. That's different. Is it? Or do you just want it to be different because it makes you feel better about what you did? She turned and walked out of his office before she said something she couldn't take back. She didn't quit. She told herself it was because she needed to finish what she'd started. Told herself it was because walking away would prove Roman right, that she was afraid of what she'd become if she stayed. But the truth was simpler. She didn't quit because the work felt good. For the first time since destroying Damien, she felt useful, purposeful, like the skills she'd taught herself in secret actually mattered to someone other than herself. Over the next 3 weeks, she found 2 more thieves in Roman's organization. A restaurant manager skimming from nightly cash deposits. A hotel maintenance supervisor charging for repairs that never happened. Both of them stupid. Both of them greedy. Both of them thinking no one would notice. She reported each one to Roman with the same clinical precision. Here's the evidence. Here's how much they took. Here's how long they've been doing it. And each time, Roman thanked her and said he'd handle it. She didn't ask what handling it meant. She told herself she didn't want to know. But late at night, alone in her apartment, she thought about Vincent Caro and wondered where he was now. Wondered if he'd been arrested or just disappeared. Wondered if Roman's version of justice looked anything like the legal system she'd used to destroy Damien, or if it looked like something older and meaner and impossible to undo. On a Friday afternoon, 4 weeks into the job, Roman called her into his office. "I'm hosting a dinner tomorrow night," he said. "Business associates, politicians, people who need to see me being social. I'd like you to come." Seraphine frowned. "I'm an accountant, not a date. I know what you are, and I'm not asking you to be anything else. But these are the people whose money I manage, the people whose businesses intersect with mine. It would be useful for you to meet them, see how they behave when they think no one important is watching. You want me to spy on your dinner guests? I want you to observe. There's a difference." She should have said no, should have reminded him that her job was numbers, not surveillance. Instead, she heard herself say, "What time?" 7:30. I'll send a car. A sheet. The dinner was held at Roman's home in Brookline. Seraphine had expected something ostentatious, a mansion, columns, the kind of house designed to intimidate. Instead, the car pulled up to a large but understated colonial tucked behind old trees at the end of a quiet street. Brick. Black shutters. Lights glowing warm in every window. A woman in her 60s answered the door. Gray hair pulled back. Kind face. Apron dusted with flour. "You must be Seraphine," she said, smiling. "I'm Elena, Roman's housekeeper, though he insists on calling me his friend, which is ridiculous because I work for him." Seraphine couldn't help smiling back. "Nice to meet you. Come in, come in. They're already drinking in the dining room, which means they'll be half drunk by the time I serve dinner, which means they'll all complain the food's too salty even though it's perfect." Elena shook her head. "Men, you want wine before you go in there? Please." Elena poured her a glass from a bottle on the side table. Red, the same kind Roman had served at their first dinner. "Nervous?" Elena asked. "Should I be?" "Only if you don't like watching rich people pretend to care about each other." She winked. "Go on. Roman's waiting." The dining room was smaller than Seraphine expected. A single long table. 12 people already seated. Candles. Fresh flowers. The smell of roasted meat and garlic. Roman stood when she entered, introduced her simply. "Everyone, this is Seraphine Laurent. She's been consulting with me on some financial projects." A few polite nods. No real interest, just the bland acknowledgement people gave to someone they assumed didn't matter. Perfect. Roman pulled out the chair beside him. "Sit." Dinner unfolded exactly the way Elena had predicted. Too much wine. Too much talking. Men interrupting each other to make points no one cared about. Women smiling politely and checking their phones under the table. Seraphine watched. She watched the state senator from Suffolk County drink 4 glasses of scotch and complain about budget cuts while wearing a watch that cost more than most people's cars. She watched the real estate developer from Cambridge flirt with the woman beside him, even though his wife sat 3 seats down. She watched the shipping executive argue about tariffs while his business partner texted someone under the table and tried not to get caught. And she watched Roman. He moved through the dinner like someone conducting an orchestra, asking questions that made people talk, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, refilling glasses before they emptied. He made everyone feel important while revealing nothing about himself. It was masterful. It was exactly what she'd done for 8 years with Damien. After dinner, the guests moved to the living room for coffee and dessert. Seraphine stayed behind, helping Elena clear plates, even though the housekeeper insisted she didn't have to. "You don't have to do that," Roman said, appearing in the doorway. "I know." Seraphine stacked another plate. "But it feels better than making small talk about property taxes." He almost smiled. Not a fan of my friends? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. You looked like you were conducting an autopsy all through dinner. She glanced at him. Isn't that what you wanted? For me to watch them? Yes, but I didn't expect you to look quite so disgusted. I'm not disgusted. I'm just... She stopped, set down the plate she was holding. They're all the same. Every single one of them. They think they're different because they have money and power, but they're all just different versions of Damien, taking things, using people, believing they've earned the right to do whatever they want because the world hasn't stopped them yet. Roman leaned against the doorframe. And what does that make me? The question hung between them like smoke. I don't know yet, Seraphine said quietly. Fair enough. He pushed off the frame. Come on. There's someone I want you to meet. He led her outside to the back patio. A man stood there smoking a cigarette, looking out at the dark yard. Seraphine, this is Marcus Webb. He runs the City Planning Commission. Marcus turned. Mid-40s, tired eyes. The kind of face that had seen too much and stopped being surprised by any of it. Nice to meet you, Seraphine said. Marcus looked at Roman. This her? This is her. You tell her yet? No. Tell me what? Seraphine looked between them. Marcus took a drag on his cigarette. There's going to be a vote next month, City Council, about rezoning the waterfront. If it passes, it'll displace about 300 families from rent-controlled housing, make room for luxury developments. Okay, Seraphine said slowly. What does that have to do with me? 3 of the council members at that dinner table tonight are being paid to vote yes, Roman said. I need you to prove it. Why? Because those families deserve to know who's selling them out. And because the developers behind this are going to make $50 million if it passes, which means they'll do it again somewhere else unless someone stops them. Seraphine stared at him. You want me to investigate city council members? I want you to find the truth, same as always. This is different, Roman. These are elected officials. If I'm wrong, you won't be wrong. His voice was calm, certain. You haven't been wrong yet. Marcus dropped his cigarette, crushed it under his heel. Look, I get that this is a lot, but those families don't have anyone else fighting for them. The lawyers won't touch it because the developers have too much power. The press won't cover it because it's too complicated and doesn't fit into a headline. You're the only person I know who can dig deep enough to find what we need. And if I do find proof, Seraphine asked, what happens then? Then we leak it, Marcus said, anonymously, to journalists who will actually run the story, and we kill the vote before it happens. She should have said no, should have walked away from this entire situation before it pulled her into something darker than she was ready for. Instead, she looked at Roman and said, I need full access to campaign finance records, email accounts, meeting schedules, everything. You'll have it by Monday. She found the proof in 11 days. One council member, Catherine Hughes from District 7, had received $40,000 in campaign contributions from a shell company owned by the development group pushing the rezoning. Another council member, Robert Thornton from District 3, had been given a consulting contract worth $75,000 for work he'd never actually performed. The third council member, James Morrison from District 9, was sleeping with the developer's executive assistant and had been for 6 months, which wasn't illegal but was definitely leverage. Seraphine compiled everything into a single document. Names, numbers, bank transfers, hotel receipts, email chains where they'd been stupid enough to discuss the votes explicitly. She handed it to Roman on a Tuesday morning. He read through it in silence, then looked up at her. This is solid. I know. You're certain? Completely. He nodded, closed the folder. Thank you. Marcus will get this to the right people. The story should break by end of week. And then 3 council members will resign, the vote will fail, and 300 families will keep their homes. He paused. You just saved people who'll never know your name. The words should have felt good. Instead, they felt heavy. Roman, she said quietly, what are we doing here? What do you mean? This. All of this. I'm not a detective. I'm not an investigator. I'm just someone who learned how to read numbers because I was married to a man who lied for a living. And now you're using those skills to help people. Am I? Or am I helping you build leverage over the same people you just had to dinner? Am I helping families keep their homes? Or am I helping you expand your territory by taking down your competition? Roman set down the folder. Does it matter? Yes, It matters. Why? Because I need to know if I'm doing something good or if I'm just trading one version of Damien for another. The words came out harsher than she meant them, but they were true, and she was tired of pretending they weren't. Roman stood, walked to the window, looked out at the harbor for a long time. My father used to say that power is just responsibility no one else wants to carry, he said finally. Every decision you make when you have power hurts someone. The question isn't whether you hurt people, it's who you choose to hurt and why. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. He turned to face her. Seraphine, I'm not going to pretend I'm a good man. I've done things I'm not proud of. I've hurt people who probably didn't deserve it. But I've also spent 30 years making sure the people who work for me can feed their families, and the neighborhoods I grew up in don't get swallowed by developers who see poor people as inconveniences. And that makes the other stuff okay? No, it just makes me human. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that wasn't good enough, that being human didn't excuse the things she suspected he'd done to people like Vincent Caro. But she thought about Damien, about what she'd done to him, about how satisfying it had felt to watch him fall, knowing she was the one who'd pushed him. Maybe Roman was right. Maybe being human just meant choosing which sins you could live with. I need some air, she said. She walked out of his office without waiting for permission, took the elevator down to the street level, stood on the waterfront letting the wind come off the harbor cold and sharp. Her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus Webb. Story breaks tomorrow morning. Front page. You did good. She stared at the message. Did good. She'd exposed corruption, protected families, used her skills to stop bad people from doing bad things. So why did she feel like she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross? Her phone buzzed again. Different number. Unknown. She opened the message. I know what you did to Damien, and I know you're working for Roman Castelli now. If you don't want everyone else to know, meet me tomorrow night. 9 p.m. Castle Island. Come alone. Seraphine's blood went cold. She read the message 3 times, trying to find some indication of who sent it, trying to figure out if this was real or just someone trying to scare her. But deep down, she knew. Someone had been watching her the way she'd been watching everyone else. And now they wanted something. She looked up at Roman's building, at the top floor where he was probably still sitting in his office, looking at the evidence she'd given him, planning his next move. She could tell him about the message. Ask for help. Let him handle it the way he handled everything else. Or she could go alone and find out exactly what kind of trouble she'd walked into. Her phone buzzed one more time. Same unknown number. Don't tell Roman. If you do, I send everything I have to the police. Your name, your role in Damien's case. All of it. Seraphine stood on the waterfront, wind cutting through her coat, staring at a threat that had just turned her entire new life into something fragile and conditional. She'd spent 3 years building an invisible empire of information. Now someone else was holding the knife. Seraphine didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed with the lights off, staring at her phone like it was a loaded gun someone had left on her nightstand. The message glowed in the darkness, each word burning itself into her memory until she could recite it without looking. Don't tell Roman. If you do, I send everything I have to the police. By 3 a.m, she'd made a decision. She was going alone. Not because she trusted whoever sent the message. Not because she thought she could handle this by herself. But because the alternative, dragging Roman into something that could expose both of them, felt worse than walking into a trap she could see coming. She'd spent 3 years preparing to destroy Damien. She'd learned to survive by anticipating threats before they materialized. This was just another threat. Another person who thought they could use fear to control her. She'd dealt with worse. At least that's what she told herself as she got dressed the next evening. Black jeans, dark sweater. The kind of clothes that didn't draw attention. She left her phone on the kitchen counter. If this person had been tracking her, they'd been doing it through the device. She took a burner phone she'd bought last month, the one with no history attached to it, and slipped it into her pocket. Then she walked out into the November cold and caught the T toward Castle Island. The ride took 40 minutes. Seraphine spent every one of them watching the other passengers, looking for anyone paying too much attention to her. A man in a business suit reading the Globe. A woman with headphones and closed eyes. A teenager with a skateboard tucked between his knees. None of them looked at her twice. By the time she got off at the last stop, the sun had set completely. The sky was that deep bruised purple that came right before true darkness, and the wind off the water cut through her coat like it had teeth. Castle Island wasn't really an island anymore, just a peninsula jutting into Boston Harbor with an old fort and a walking path that wrapped around the water. During the day, it was full of joggers and families. At night, it belonged to people who wanted to be invisible. Seraphine walked the path slowly, hands in her pockets, eyes scanning the shadows. At exactly 9 o'clock, she reached the far end near Fort Independence. The old stone walls rose up in the darkness like something left over from a war no one remembered. The water crashed against the rocks below, loud and relentless. A figure stood near the seawall. Seraphine's heart kicked hard. She walked closer, slowly, every muscle in her body ready to run. The figure turned. Victoria Chen, Damien's mistress. The woman with the long black hair and expensive dresses who'd been draped across his chest the night Seraphine signed her divorce papers. "Hello, Celeste," Victoria said. Her voice was smooth, controlled, nothing like the breathy, performative tone she'd used at all those charity galas when she thought Seraphine wasn't paying attention. "Or should I call you Seraphine now?" Seraphine stopped 10 feet away. "What do you want?" "The same thing you wanted from Damien. Justice." Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Though I suppose you'd call it revenge. Semantics." "I don't know what you're talking about. Please, don't insult me by pretending you're stupid. You're the smartest person Damien ever underestimated, which is saying something because he underestimated everyone." Victoria pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, held it up so Seraphine could see. The screen showed a photo of Seraphine walking into Roman's building on Lewis Wharf. Another photo of her sitting at Il Mercato across from Roman. Another of her at his house in Brookline. "I've been watching you for 2 months," Victoria said. "Ever since you disappeared after destroying Damien's life. I wanted to know where you went, what you were doing, who you became when you finally stopped being his wife." "You're insane." "No, I'm thorough. There's a difference." Victoria lowered the phone. "Do you know what it's like to watch someone you love get destroyed and not be able to do anything about it?" Seraphine's jaw tightened. "Damien wasn't worth loving." "You don't get to decide that. You had 8 years with him. I had 6 months. 6 months where he actually saw me, talked to me, treated me like I mattered, and then you took that away because you decided he deserved to suffer." "He was a criminal. So are you." Victoria stepped closer. "You think what you did was legal? Hacking his accounts? Stealing documents? Passing confidential information to journalists? You committed at least 6 felonies bringing him down. The only difference between you and Damien is that you were better at hiding it." The words hit like a fist to the chest. Not because they were wrong, because they were right. "What do you want?" Seraphine asked again, her voice harder this time. "I want you to feel what I felt. Helpless. Watching everything you care about collapse while someone else holds all the power." Victoria pulled an envelope from her coat pocket, held it up. "This is a copy of everything I've compiled on you over the past 2 months. Your real name, your connection to the Laurent fortune, your role in Damien's case that the prosecutors don't know about, your current employment with Roman Castelli, who, by the way, has some very interesting business dealings the FBI would love to know more about." Seraphine's blood went cold. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Victoria opened the envelope, pulled out papers. Even in the dim light, Seraphine could see her own handwriting on some of them, notes she'd made while investigating Damien, documents she thought she'd destroyed. "I hired a very good private investigator, someone who knows how to find digital footprints people think they've erased. Someone who understands that when you destroy a man as thoroughly as you destroyed Damien, you leave traces. If you had real evidence, you would have gone to the police already. Maybe, or maybe I wanted to see if you'd do the right thing first." The right thing. "Turn yourself in. Confess what you did. Let Damien's conviction get overturned on the grounds that the evidence against him was obtained illegally." Seraphine laughed. It came out sharp and bitter. "You're out of your mind. Damien's guilty. Everyone knows he's guilty. The evidence I provided just made it easier to prove." "Easier to prove or easier to convict an innocent man?" "He's not innocent." "How do you know?" Victoria's voice rose for the first time, cracking around the edges. How do you know you didn't plant evidence, manipulate numbers? You were so angry at him, so hurt by what he did to you. How do you know you didn't see guilt everywhere because you wanted to see it? Because I know what I found. I know what he did. Do you? Or did you just find what you were looking for? The question hung in the salt air between them. Seraphine wanted to scream that Victoria was wrong, that she'd been meticulous, that every piece of evidence she'd gathered was real and verifiable. But a small voice in the back of her mind whispered, "What if you missed something? What if your anger made you blind?" No, she'd been careful. She'd checked everything twice, 3 times. She'd made sure every document was authentic, every number accurate. She hadn't planted evidence. She hadn't lied. But would a jury believe that if Victoria's investigator had found proof that she'd hacked Damien's accounts? "This is blackmail," Seraphine said quietly. "This is justice. The same justice you gave Damien." Victoria slid the papers back into the envelope. "You have 1 week to turn yourself in. If you don't, I go to the police with everything I have. And trust me, they'll be very interested to know that the star witness who brought down one of Boston's biggest financial criminals is herself a criminal." "And what about Roman? What about him?" "You said you have information on his business dealings, information the FBI would want." Victoria smiled. "I do. But Roman Castelli isn't my concern. You are. He just happens to be collateral damage, which I think is fitting, considering how many people became collateral damage when you decided to destroy Damien." Seraphine's hands curled into fists in her pockets. "You don't know what he did to me. The things he said, the way he made me feel like I was nothing. I don't care." Victoria's voice went flat, cold. "You don't get to destroy someone's life and then claim victim status because your feelings were hurt. Damien loved you. Maybe he didn't love you the way you wanted, but he loved you. And you repaid that love by burning down everything he built. He loved you too, for 6 months. Then he would have gotten bored and moved on to someone else. That's who he was. You don't know that." "Yes, I do. Because I was you once, young and stupid and convinced he saw something special in me. Then I woke up one day and realized I was just another accessory he used to make himself look good." Victoria's face twisted with something ugly. 1 week, Seraphine. Turn yourself in, or I ruin you the way you ruined him." She turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows along the seawall. Seraphine stood alone in the darkness, listening to the waves crash against the rocks below. Her hands shook. Not from cold. From rage so pure it felt like fire in her veins. She'd spent 3 years planning Damien's destruction. 3 years being careful, being invisible, covering her tracks. And now some woman who'd spent 6 months sleeping with her husband was going to tear it all down. She pulled out the burner phone, stared at it. She should call Roman, tell him what just happened, let him handle it the way he handled everything else. But Victoria had been clear, don't tell Roman, and Seraphine believed her. Victoria had done her homework. If she had evidence of Roman's illegal dealings, she'd use it the moment she felt threatened. Seraphine couldn't risk that, which meant she was on her own. She walked back along the path toward the parking lot, mind racing through options. She could run, disappear again, take the Laurent fortune and vanish somewhere Victoria couldn't find her. But running meant abandoning the life she'd just started building, abandoning Roman and the work that had finally made her feel useful. She could fight, hire lawyers, discredit Victoria before she went to the police. But fighting meant exposure, meant dragging everything into the light where prosecutors and investigators could pick through the details of how she'd really brought down Damien. Or she could do what Victoria wanted, turn herself in, confess. Let Damien's conviction get overturned and watch him walk free. That option felt like death. She reached the parking lot, started walking toward the T station, then stopped. Her phone, the burner, buzzed. Text from a number she didn't recognize. "I saw what happened at Castle Island. We need to talk, now. I'm parked at the Sullivan's lot. Black Mercedes. Don't make me wait." Seraphine's heart slammed against her ribs. Someone else had been watching. Someone else knew about Victoria. She should run, should get as far away from this situation as possible. Instead, she turned and walked toward Sullivan's parking lot. The black Mercedes sat in the far corner, engine running, headlights off. As she got closer, the passenger door opened. Roman sat in the driver's seat. "Get in," he said. She got in. He pulled out of the parking lot without speaking, drove through the streets of South Boston with the kind of precision that came from knowing exactly where he was going and not caring whether she wanted to go there with him. "You followed me," Seraphine said finally. "I had someone follow you. There's a difference. You knew I'd gotten a threat. I suspected. You've been different the past 2 days, distracted, scared. So I had Marcus put a watch on you just in case." "You had no right." "I had every right." Roman's voice was cold, harder than she'd ever heard it. "You work for me. You have access to information that could destroy everything I've built. If someone's threatening you, they're threatening me. This isn't about you. Everything's about me when it happens to people in my organization." He glanced at her. "Who's Victoria Chen?" "Damien's girlfriend." "And what does she want?" Seraphine looked out the window at the city passing by in streaks of light. "She wants me to confess. Turn myself in. Admit that I obtained evidence against Damien illegally." "Did you?" "Yes." The word came out before she could stop it, before she could soften it or deflect or lie. Roman was quiet for a long moment. "How illegal?" "Illegal enough that if the prosecutors find out, they could overturn Damien's conviction and charge me with multiple felonies. And Victoria Chen has proof? She says she does. Then she probably does." Roman turned down a side street, pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a building Seraphine didn't recognize. "Come on." "Where are we going?" "Somewhere we can talk without worrying about who's listening." The parking garage elevator opened into a small apartment. One bedroom, bare walls, furniture that looked functional rather than decorative, the kind of place you kept for emergencies. Roman locked the door behind them, walked to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a bottle on the counter, handed one to Seraphine. "Drink." She drank. The alcohol burned all the way down. "Sit." She sat on the couch. Roman sat across from her in a chair that looked like it had seen better decades. "Tell me everything," he said. "Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." So she told him. She told him about the 3 years she'd spent learning forensic accounting in secret, about the nights she'd hacked into Damien's personal accounts using passwords he'd saved on their shared computer, about the documents she'd photographed with her phone, the bank statements she'd copied, the emails she'd forwarded to an anonymous account she'd set up specifically for evidence gathering. She told him about finding the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the embezzled funds, about how she'd compiled everything into a package so clean and comprehensive that prosecutors couldn't ignore it even if they'd wanted to. She told him about the journalists she'd cultivated, the lawyers she'd consulted anonymously, the careful timing of when she'd released what information to maximize damage. And she told him that she'd known it was illegal, every step of the way. She'd known she was breaking laws, violating privacy, crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed, but she'd done it anyway, because stopping Damien had felt more important than staying clean. When she finished, Roman sat in silence for a long time, just looking at her, his face unreadable. "You realize what this means?" he said finally. "Yes. If Victoria goes to the police, you'll be arrested, charged. You could go to prison." "I know. And if Damien's conviction gets overturned because of how you obtained the evidence, he walks free. Everything you did to him, gone. Wasted." "I know." Roman stood, walked to the window, looked out at nothing because the window faced a brick wall 3 feet away. "There are ways to handle this," he said quietly. "What kind of ways?" "The kind you don't want to know about." Seraphine set down her glass. "You want to kill her." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Roman turned to face her. "Seraphine, I've spent 30 years protecting what's mine. The businesses, the people who work for me, the neighborhoods I grew up in. I don't protect those things by playing fair. I protect them by being willing to do what other people won't. Victoria Chen is not your problem to solve. She became my problem the moment she threatened you, and by extension threatened me." "No." Seraphine stood. "I'm not letting you kill someone because I made mistakes." "They weren't mistakes. They were choices. And now you have to live with the consequences of those choices." His voice stayed level, calm, which somehow made the words more terrifying. "But you don't have to live with them alone." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I can make Victoria Chen disappear, quietly. permanently. No one will ever find her, no one will ever know what happened, and you'll be safe. The words settled into the room like ash after a fire. Seraphine stared at him, at this man she'd been working for, this man who'd given her purpose when she felt lost, this man who'd made her feel seen for the first time in years, this man who was offering to commit murder on her behalf. "I can't let you do that," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because it's wrong." "Wrong?" Roman laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You destroyed Damien's entire life, sent him to prison for 20 years, took away his freedom, his money, his reputation. And you did it by breaking laws you knew you were breaking. But somehow killing one woman who's trying to ruin you, that's where you draw the line?" "Yes." "Why? Because you can sleep at night knowing Damien's in a cell, but you couldn't sleep knowing Victoria's in the ground?" "Yes." Roman shook his head. "You're not as pragmatic as I thought." "I never said I was pragmatic. I said I was angry. There's a difference. Anger doesn't protect you. Power protects you. And right now, Victoria Chen has all the power." Seraphine walked to the door, put her hand on the knob. "I'm not letting you kill her, Roman. Find another way. There is no other way." "Then I'll handle it myself." She opened the door, stepped into the hallway. "Seraphine," Roman's voice stopped her. "If you don't let me handle this, you're going to prison, and Damien walks free. Is that really what you want?" She looked back at him, at this man who'd shown her a version of power she'd never understood before. Power that didn't need to perform. Power that just was. "I want to live with myself," she said quietly, "even if it means losing everything else." Then she walked out. Thanks. She went back to her apartment and sat in the darkness trying to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do now. Victoria had given her 1 week, 7 days to turn herself in or watch everything collapse. Roman had offered to solve the problem permanently. Both options felt like dying. At 2 a.m, her phone rang. The burner. She answered. "Seraphine Laurent?" A woman's voice, clipped, professional. "Who is this?" "My name is Agent Sarah Nakamura. I'm with the FBI. I need you to come to our field office tomorrow morning at 9. We have some questions about your relationship with Roman Castelli." Seraphine's world tilted. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Miss Laurent, we know you've been working for Mr. Castelli for the past 2 months. We know you've been conducting financial investigations into several of his business associates, and we know that one of those investigations resulted in the exposure of 3 city council members for corruption. That wasn't, we're not accusing you of anything, yet, but we need to talk tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, Federal Building on Courthouse Way. Come alone, or we'll send agents to pick you up." The line went dead. Seraphine sat holding the phone, her hand shaking so badly she almost dropped it. The FBI. The FBI knew about Roman, knew about her, which meant Victoria hadn't waited a week. She'd already gone to the authorities, but not the local police. The FBI. Which meant she'd given them something bigger than just Seraphine's role in Damien's case. She'd given them Roman. Seraphine grabbed her laptop, opened it with shaking hands, started searching for any news about FBI investigations into Roman Castelli. Nothing. She searched for Victoria Chen. Nothing. She searched for recent arrests, federal investigations, anything that might explain why the FBI was calling her at 2 a.m. And then she found it. A small article from 3 hours ago, hidden in the Metro section of the Globe's website. Woman's body. Found in Boston Harbor, police are investigating after a woman's body was discovered in Boston Harbor near Castle Island late Monday evening. The victim has been identified as Victoria Chen, 26, of Cambridge. Authorities have not yet determined the cause of death, but are treating it as suspicious. Anyone with information is urged to contact Boston police. Seraphine's stomach dropped. Victoria was dead. Dead less than 6 hours after she'd threatened Seraphine at Castle Island. Dead after Roman had followed her there. Dead after Roman had offered to make her disappear. Seraphine's hands went numb. The laptop slid off her knees. She barely noticed. Roman had killed her, or had someone kill her, despite everything Seraphine had said, despite her explicitly telling him not to. He'd done it anyway, and now the FBI wanted to talk to her about it. She stood, started pacing. Her breath came too fast, too shallow. The walls of the apartment felt like they were closing in. She'd spent 3 years destroying Damien for being a criminal, and now she was working for someone worse, someone who committed murder to protect his interests, someone who'd just made her an accessory. Her phone buzzed. Text from Roman's number. I know you're angry, but I did what needed to be done. You're safe now. That's all that matters. Seraphine stared at the message. Safe. She wasn't safe. She was trapped. Trapped in a situation where the only people who could save her were the same people who could destroy her, where every choice led to prison or death or becoming something she'd never wanted to be. She thought about Damien in his cell, thought about how satisfying it had felt to watch him fall, and she realized with sick clarity that she'd become exactly what she'd hated, someone who broke laws to punish people they thought deserved it, someone who justified violence as justice, someone who was so focused on survival that they'd stopped caring who else got hurt. She sat down on the floor, put her head in her hands, and for the first time since signing her divorce papers, Seraphine Laurent let herself cry. Not from fear, not from anger, but from the terrible understanding that she'd walked so far into the darkness trying to escape Damien that she couldn't see the light anymore. Dawn broke gray and cold over Boston. Seraphine stood in the shower, letting scalding water pour over her until her skin turned red. Then she got dressed. Black suit, white shirt, the clothes she used to wear to charity galas when she was still pretending to be Damien's wife. She looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked like someone who'd survived something terrible and was about to survive something worse. At 8:45, she walked into the federal building on Courthouse Way. Agent Sarah Nakamura was waiting in a conference room on the 3rd floor. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, the kind of person who saw through lies the way Seraphine saw through cooked books. Miss Laurent, thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? No. Nakamura gestured to a chair. Sit. Seraphine sat. Nakamura placed a folder on the table between them. Do you know why you're here? You want to ask me about Roman Castelli. Partially, but mostly, we want to ask you about Victoria Chen. Seraphine's blood went cold. I don't know anything about that. Really? Because our investigation shows that Ms. Chen contacted you yesterday evening, arranged a meeting at Castle Island, and less than 6 hours later, she was dead. I didn't kill her. I didn't say you did. Nakamura opened the folder, pulled out photographs, set them on the table one by one. Victoria at Castle Island, talking to someone the camera couldn't quite capture in the darkness. A black Mercedes leaving the Sullivans' parking lot. Roman's face through the driver's side window. We've been investigating Roman Castelli for 2 years, Nakamura said quietly. Money laundering, racketeering, extortion. We know he runs half of Boston's underground economy through legitimate businesses. We just haven't been able to prove it. She pulled out more photos. Seraphine walking into Roman's building. Seraphine at his house in Brookline. Seraphine sitting in his car at Castle Island. And then you appeared, Nakamura continued. Celeste Arden. Seraphine Laurent. The woman who destroyed one of Boston's biggest financial criminals, working for another one. I didn't know. Yes, you did. You're too smart not to. Nakamura leaned forward. Here's what I think happened. I think Victoria Chen found out about your illegal activities during the Damien Vale investigation. I think she threatened to expose you. I think you told Roman Castelli. And I think he killed her to protect you. That's not... And I think, Nakamura said, her voice dropping even lower, that if you don't help us bring down Roman Castelli, you're going to spend the next 20 years in prison as an accessory to murder. The words hung in the air like a noose. Seraphine looked at the photographs spread across the table, at the evidence of her own complicity, at the life she'd built crumbling into pieces she couldn't put back together. What do you want from me? She whispered. Nakamura smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. I want you to do what you do best, Miss Laurent. I want you to destroy someone from the inside. And this time, I want you to do it legally. She pushed a document across the table. Immunity agreement, full protection from prosecution for any crimes committed during the Damien Vale investigation. Full protection from prosecution for any knowledge of Victoria Chen's murder. In exchange for complete cooperation in the FBI's investigation of Roman Castelli. All you have to do, Nakamura said, is sign, and keep doing exactly what you've been doing, working for Roman, gathering evidence. Except this time, you give that evidence to us. Seraphine stared at the document, at the signature line waiting for her name, at the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. She thought about Roman, about the way he'd listened to her, seen her, given her purpose when she felt lost. She thought about Victoria, about her body in the harbor, about the violence that happened in shadows while people like Seraphine pretended not to see. She thought about Damien, about whether destroying him had been justice or just the first step on a path that led here. And she thought about who she was supposed to be now that everything she'd built was burning. Her hand shook as she picked up the pen. "If I do this," she said quietly, "what happens to Roman? He goes to prison for the rest of his life. And me? You walk away, free, clean, like none of this ever happened." Seraphine looked at Agent Nakamura. "Nothing's ever clean." "No," Nakamura agreed, "but some dirt washes off easier than others." Seraphine pressed the pen to paper and signed her name for the second time in 2 months. This time, it felt like signing a death warrant. Not hers, someone else's. Someone who'd shown her that power could be used to protect people instead of control them. Someone who'd killed to keep her safe. Someone who would never forgive her for this betrayal. She set down the pen. "What do you need me to do?" Agent Nakamura's smile widened. "Everything." Seraphine walked out of the federal building with the immunity agreement folded in her coat pocket and a wire taped to her ribs. The device was smaller than she'd expected, about the size of a quarter, thin enough that it didn't show through her shirt. Agent Nakamura had attached it herself in a windowless room on the 4th floor, her hands clinical and efficient as she'd pressed the adhesive to Seraphine's skin just below her sternum. "It's voice-activated," Nakamura had explained. "Picks up everything within 15 feet. Don't touch it, don't acknowledge it. Just act normal." Normal. Seraphine almost laughed. Nothing about the past 12 hours had been normal. Nothing about what she was about to do felt anywhere close to normal. She was going to betray the only person who'd seen her as something other than damaged goods. She was going to gather evidence against a man who'd killed to protect her. She was going to become exactly what Victoria Chen had accused her of being, a liar, a manipulator, someone who destroyed people and called it justice. Her phone buzzed. Roman's number. "Where are you? We need to talk." She stared at the message. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. Every instinct screamed at her to warn him, to tell him the FBI was watching, to give him a chance to disappear before everything came crashing down. But the wire pressed cold against her skin, recording everything, listening, waiting for her to make a mistake. She typed back, "On my way to your office now." The walk to Lewis Wharf took 20 minutes. Seraphine used every second of it to build a version of herself that could stand in front of Roman Castelli and lie without breaking. She'd done it before. With Damien. Every smile at those charity galas had been a lie. Every touch had been performance. Every conversation had been her playing a role she'd perfected over 8 years. This shouldn't feel different, but it did. Because Damien had never actually seen her. He'd seen a reflection of what he wanted. A quiet wife who made him look good and asked no questions. Roman had seen something else. Something real. The anger, the intelligence. The woman who'd taught herself to survive by becoming invisible. And now she was going to use that against him. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like descending instead of rising, like she was falling toward something she couldn't come back from. Roman stood at his desk when she walked in. He looked tired, older than he had yesterday. The lines around his eyes had deepened, and there was something in his expression she'd never seen before. Worry. "Close the door," he said. She closed it. "Sit." She sat. Roman walked to the window, looked out at the harbor. "I know what you're thinking." "Do you?" "You're thinking I'm a monster, that I killed Victoria Chen in cold blood, that I didn't give you a choice." Seraphine's heart kicked hard against her ribs, against the wire. "Did you kill her?" "Does it matter?" "Yes." He turned to face her. "Why? What changes if I say yes? What changes if I say no?" "Everything. Nothing changes, Seraphine. You've known what I am since the day we met. You've seen the people I've had removed from my businesses. You've watched me operate in the spaces between legal and illegal without ever asking too many questions. The only difference now is that the violence touched something close to you, and suddenly your conscience woke up. The words landed like punches, each one true, each one designed to hurt. I told you not to do it, she said quietly. I explicitly told you not to kill her. And I explicitly told you there was no other way. Roman moved closer. Not threatening, just close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried that most people never noticed. Victoria Chen wasn't going to stop. She had evidence. She had motivation. She was going to destroy you, and by extension, destroy me. I did what needed to be done to protect us both. You mean you did what you wanted to do regardless of what I said? Yes. No apology, no softening, just the truth laid bare between them. Because sometimes protecting people means making decisions they can't make themselves. Seraphine stood. I didn't ask you to protect me. You didn't have to. That's what people do when they care about someone. They protect them, even when it costs them something. It didn't cost you anything. It cost Victoria her life. Victoria Chen made her own choices. She chose to threaten you. She chose to dig into things that were none of her business. She chose to stand between you and your freedom. I simply removed the obstacle. The casual way he said it, removed the obstacle, made Seraphine's stomach turn. She was a person, Roman, not an obstacle. She was both. He poured himself whiskey from the decanter on his desk, didn't offer her any. And now she's neither, and you're safe. That's the only thing that matters. The wire burned against her skin. Seraphine wondered if Nakamura was listening right now, if she'd just heard Roman Castelli confess to murder in the most indirect way possible, if this was enough. The FBI came to see me this morning, Seraphine said. Roman's hand froze halfway to his mouth. The glass stopped moving. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, he was completely still. Then he set down the glass very carefully. What did you tell them? Nothing. Yet. Yet. He repeated the word like he was tasting poison. What does that mean? It means they know about Victoria. They know about you and me. They know I was at Castle Island when she died. Seraphine forced herself to meet his eyes, to hold his gaze without flinching. They offered me immunity in exchange for testimony against you. The silence that followed was so complete she could hear her own heartbeat, could hear the wire pressing against her skin, could hear the city breathing beyond the windows. Did you take it? Roman asked finally. No. The lie came out smooth, perfect, exactly the way she'd practiced it on the walk over. Roman studied her, looking for the crack, the tell, the tiny indication that she was lying to him. She gave him nothing. Why not? He asked. Because I'm not ready to become the person who destroys everyone who gets close to her. You already are that person, Seraphine. You destroyed Damien. You're helping me destroy people who steal from me. The only difference is you've been telling yourself it's justified. Maybe it is justified. Or maybe you're just good at choosing targets you don't feel guilty about hurting. Roman picked up his glass again, drank. What did the FBI say when you refused their offer? That they'd arrest me as an accessory to murder, that I had 48 hours to reconsider. And are you reconsidering? Seraphine let the question hang. Let him wonder. Let him feel the same uncertainty she'd felt standing in that conference room, signing away everything she'd built. I don't know, she said finally. Are you going to kill me if I do? Roman laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was harsh and unexpected, like something breaking. You think that's what this is? You think I'm some movie villain who kills everyone who threatens him? I think you killed Victoria Chen less than 6 hours after she became a problem. I think you've killed other people who became problems. And I think if I become a problem, you'll do the same to me. Then why are you still here? Why didn't you take the FBI's deal and disappear? Because I wanted to look you in the eye and ask you one question. What question? Did any of this mean anything to you? The dinners, the conversations, the work we did together? Was any of it real, or was I just another asset you were managing? The question stripped the room bare. Roman stared at her like she'd just spoken a language he didn't understand. You think I hired you because I needed an accountant? His voice dropped low. Dangerous. Seraphine, I have 6 accountants on payroll. I have forensic specialists. I have people who do what you do better and cheaper and without asking questions that could get them killed. Then why me? Because you understood what it cost to survive in a world built by men who thought you didn't matter. Because you'd already proven you could destroy someone powerful without leaving fingerprints. Because when I looked at you, I saw someone who'd spent years being invisible and finally decided to become dangerous. He set down his glass hard enough that it cracked. I hired you because you reminded me of myself before I learned that caring about people was the fastest way to lose them. The words hung between them like smoke from a gun that had just been fired. Seraphine's throat tightened. What happened to you? The same thing that happened to you. Someone I loved betrayed me. Someone I trusted used everything I'd given them to destroy me. And I learned that the only person you can trust in this world is yourself. That's not true, isn't it? You're standing here lying to me right now. I can see it in your eyes. You took the FBI's deal. You're wearing a wire, and you're trying to decide if you can get me to confess to murder before I figure out what you've done. Seraphine's blood went cold. He knew. He'd known the entire time. Roman walked around the desk slowly, each step deliberate, controlled. He stopped 3 feet from her, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. Take off your shirt, he said quietly. What? Take off your shirt. Her hand shook as she reached for the buttons. She thought about running, about screaming, about doing anything except standing here, letting him confirm what he already knew. But her body wouldn't move. She unbuttoned her shirt with fingers that felt numb. Let it fall open. The wire sat against her skin like a black star. Roman stared at it, then at her. His face showed nothing. No anger, no betrayal, just that same careful stillness she'd mistaken for strength. How long? He asked. This morning. And everything you just said. About refusing their deal, about not being ready to destroy me. That was all performance. Yes. The truth came out like a confession, like something she'd been holding inside for hours finally breaking free. Roman nodded once. Get out. Roman, get out of my office. Get out of my building. Get out of my city. His voice never rose, never cracked, just stayed level and cold and absolutely final. If I see you again, Seraphine, I won't kill you. I'll do something worse. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you did to Damien, how you hacked his accounts, how you planted evidence, how you lied to prosecutors and journalists and anyone else who got close enough to believe you. You can't prove that. I don't have to prove it. I just have to say it. And by the time you convince anyone I'm lying, your reputation will be destroyed. Your immunity deal will be worthless, and you'll spend the rest of your life wondering when the next person you betrayed will come looking for revenge. Seraphine buttoned her shirt with shaking hands. The FBI is listening to this conversation. I know. I don't care. I didn't confess to anything they don't already suspect. And by the time they get a warrant to search this building, every piece of evidence they need will be gone. He walked back to the window, turned his back on her. You were right, Seraphine. This did mean something to me. Which is why I'm letting you walk out of here instead of doing what I should do. What should you do? He didn't answer. Seraphine stood there for 5 seconds. 10, waiting for him to turn around, to say something else, to give her any indication that he understood why she'd made this choice. But he just stood there looking out at the harbor, his shoulders rigid with something that might have been grief or might have been rage or might have been both. She walked out. Boots. Agent Nakamura was waiting in an unmarked car 2 blocks from Lewis Wharf. Seraphine got in the passenger seat without being told, ripped the wire off her chest, threw it on the dashboard. Did you get what you needed? Her voice came out raw, damaged. Nakamura started the car. He didn't confess to anything specific, but he confirmed he knew about Victoria Chen, confirmed he took action to protect you. That's enough to get a warrant. For what? He just told me he's already destroying evidence. Then we'll find what he can't destroy. Bank records, digital footprints, people he's worked with who will turn on him to save themselves. Nakamura glanced at her. You did good in there. I betrayed someone who trusted me. You stopped a murderer from hurting more people. There's a difference. Is there? Seraphine looked out the window at Boston passing by, at the city she'd been born in and abandoned and come back to and destroyed piece by piece. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels exactly the same. Nakamura drove in silence for a while, then, Where do you want me to drop you? Nowhere. I don't want to go anywhere. You need to go somewhere. Roman Castelli just threatened you. That's not something you ignore. He won't come after me. How do you know? Because he meant what he said. This meant something to him, which means he'll hurt me in ways that don't require violence. Seraphine closed her eyes. Take me to the airport. Where are you going? I don't know yet. Somewhere he can't find me. Somewhere the FBI can't find me. Somewhere I can figure out who I'm supposed to be when I'm not destroying people. The immunity deal protects you. You don't have to run. The immunity deal protects me from prosecution. It doesn't protect me from myself. She opened her eyes. I spent 3 years planning to destroy Damien, 2 months working for Roman, and every single day of that time I told myself I was doing the right thing, that I was protecting people, that I was making the world better. You were. Was I? Or was I just hurting people and calling it justice because it made me feel powerful? Nakamura pulled over, put the car in park, turned to face her fully. Seraphine, listen to me. Damien Vale was a criminal who stole from people who trusted him. Roman Castelli is a murderer who runs organized crime operations across this city. Victoria Chen is dead because she tried to expose both of you. None of that is your fault. Victoria Chen is dead because I told Roman she was threatening me. If I'd kept my mouth shut, if I'd handled it myself, she'd still be alive. If you'd kept your mouth shut, you'd be in prison right now, or dead. Roman would have found out anyway and done exactly what he did. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because I've been investigating men like Roman Castelli for 15 years. They don't change. They don't reform. They protect what's theirs by any means necessary, and they don't lose sleep over who gets hurt in the process. Seraphine looked at her, at this woman who'd spent her career chasing criminals, who'd probably seen more violence and corruption than Seraphine could imagine, who still believed in some version of right and wrong that made the job bearable. How do you do it? Seraphine asked quietly. Do what? Keep believing that you're one of the good guys when you have to do bad things to stop bad people. Nakamura smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. I don't believe I'm one of the good guys. I believe I'm one of the necessary guys. There's a difference. What difference? Good guys think the world is black and white. Necessary guys know it's all gray and someone has to draw lines anyway. She put the car back in gear. Come on, I'll take you to the airport. But Seraphine? Yeah? Don't disappear too far. We're going to need you to testify when this goes to trial. 3 weeks later, Seraphine stood in a small cottage outside Portland, Maine, watching snow fall over the harbor. She'd rented the place under a fake name with cash from an account Roman didn't know existed. It was small. 1 bedroom, a kitchen that smelled like salt and old wood, windows that looked out at water that seemed to stretch forever. No one knew where she was. Not the FBI, not Roman, not anyone. She'd finally disappeared the way she'd always wanted to, completely, permanently. So why did it feel like drowning? Her phone, a new burner she'd bought at a gas station in New Hampshire, rang for the first time in 3 weeks. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Miss Laurent? A man's voice, cultured, careful. My name is Elias Verne. I'm an attorney representing Roman Castelli. Seraphine's heart stopped. How did you get this number? The same way Mr. Castelli gets everything. He pays attention to patterns most people ignore. Papers shuffled on the other end of the line. I'm calling to inform you that Mr. Castelli has been arrested on charges of racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. His trial begins in 4 months. The prosecution plans to call you as their primary witness. I know, the FBI already told me. I'm sure they did. What they probably didn't tell you is that Mr. Castelli has evidence of your illegal activities during the Damien Vale investigation. Evidence that would invalidate your immunity agreement and expose you to federal prosecution. Cold spread through Seraphine's chest. He's bluffing. He's not, and he's prepared to use that evidence unless you agree to his terms. What terms? Don't testify against him. Refuse to cooperate with the FBI. Let the case fall apart due to lack of witness cooperation. And if I refuse? Then he destroys you the way you destroyed Damien Vale. Except this time, there won't be any immunity deal to protect you. Seraphine sat down on the floor. Her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. Why is he doing this? Because you betrayed him, Miss Laurent. And Mr. Castelli doesn't forgive betrayal. He killed someone. So did you, in a way. You destroyed Damien Vale's life so completely that he'll spend the next 12 years in prison. You worked with Mr. Castelli knowing what he was. You only cared about the violence when it touched you directly. Don't pretend you're better than him just because your methods were legal. The words gutted her. Not because they were cruel, because they were true. What does he want from me? She whispered. Silence. Disappearance. For you to vanish and never speak his name again. In exchange, he'll keep your secrets. He'll let you live whatever life you build for yourself. But if you testify against him, Miss Laurent, he will burn your entire world down, and unlike you, he won't feel guilty about it. The line went dead. Seraphine sat on the floor of the cottage, holding a phone that had just delivered an ultimatum she couldn't refuse. Testify and lose everything, or stay silent and let a murderer walk free. She thought about Victoria Chen's body in the harbor, about the families whose homes she'd saved by exposing those council members, about Damien rotting in prison for crimes he'd actually committed. She thought about justice and revenge, and whether there was any real difference between them when you were the one holding the knife. And she thought about Roman, about the way he'd looked at her that last day in his office, the exhaustion in his eyes, the disappointment. You reminded me of myself before I learned that caring about people was the fastest way to lose them. Her phone rang again. This time it was Nakamura. We have a problem, the agent said without preamble. Roman Castelli just filed a motion to dismiss all charges based on prosecutorial misconduct. He's claiming we coerced you into wearing a wire without proper authorization, that we violated his rights by using you as an unregistered informant. Is that true? No. But his lawyers are good. They'll drag this out for months, maybe years. And without your testimony, we don't have enough evidence to convict him. What do you need from me? I need you to come back to Boston. I need you to sit in that courtroom and tell the jury exactly what Roman Castelli is, what he's done, what he's capable of doing. And if I don't, then he wins, he walks, and everything you did, everything we did, was for nothing. Seraphine closed her eyes. He has evidence against me. From the Damien case. He says if I testify, he'll expose me. Silence on the other end, then. Is the evidence real? Yes. Would it invalidate your immunity agreement? Probably. More silence. Longer this time. Seraphine Bachuri, Nakamura said finally, I can't force you to testify if it means going to prison. That's not a choice I can make for you. But I need you to understand what happens if you don't. Roman Castelli killed Victoria Chen. He's killed other people. He'll kill more people. And every single one of those deaths will be on your conscience because you had the power to stop him and chose not to. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, but it's the truth. The call ended. Seraphine sat in the cottage, listening to the wind howl off the water, listening to the old wood creak, listening to her own breathing, shallow and fast, like she'd been running for miles and had just realized she'd been running in circles. Two choices. Both of them led to destruction. Testify and go to prison for what she'd done to Damien. Stay silent and let Roman go free to hurt more people. She stood, walked to the window, looked out at the harbor where boats rocked in the darkness, their light small and fragile against the vast black water, and she made her decision. 4 months later, Seraphine Laurent walked into Suffolk County Courthouse wearing a black dress and the emerald ring her grandfather had given her. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, lawyers, federal agents, people who'd come to watch Roman Castelli finally face justice. He sat at the defense table in a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. His face was calm, unreadable. But when Seraphine walked in, his eyes found hers across the room. He didn't look away. Neither did she. Agent Nakamura sat in the front row. She nodded once when Seraphine passed. A silent acknowledgement of what was about to happen. The bailiff called the court to order. The judge entered. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, the prosecution calls Seraphine Laurent to the stand. Seraphine walked forward on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Someone braver. Someone who knew what the right choice looked like. She placed her hand on the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? She thought about Damien in his cell, about Victoria in the harbor, about all the people she'd hurt while telling herself she was doing good. She thought about Roman and the way he'd seen her when no one else had, and she thought about the woman she'd been the night she signed her divorce papers, the woman who'd decided to stop surviving and start living. That woman would have known what to do. That woman would have chosen justice over self-preservation. That woman was gone now, and Seraphine didn't know if she was ever coming back. "I do," she said. The prosecutor approached. "Miss Laurent, can you please tell the court how you know the defendant, Roman Castelli?" Seraphine looked at Roman. He looked back, and in his eyes, she saw everything she'd become reflected back at her. The lies, the compromises, the willingness to hurt people and call it necessary. She opened her mouth and began to speak. Seraphine's voice echoed through the courtroom like a verdict being read. "I met Roman Castelli 2 months after my divorce was finalized. He contacted me through an anonymous channel and asked to meet for dinner. I didn't know who he was at the time. I didn't know what he wanted. I only knew that someone had been watching me closely enough to know my real name." The prosecutor nodded, making notes. "And what happened at that dinner, Miss Laurent?" "He offered me a job. He said he needed someone who understood how money moved through invisible channels, someone who could find thieves in his organization without them knowing they were being investigated." "And did you accept this offer?" "Yes." "Why?" Seraphine's throat tightened. She looked at Roman. He sat perfectly still, his face giving nothing away. But his eyes held something she'd never seen in them before. Resignation. "Because I needed purpose," she said quietly. "I'd just spent 3 years destroying my ex-husband's empire. I'd won. I'd gotten everything I wanted. And I woke up the morning after it was all over and realized I had no idea who I was supposed to be when I wasn't fighting someone." "So you went to work for Mr. Castelli?" "Yes." "And what did that work entail?" Seraphine took a breath. This was it. The moment where she either told the truth that would send Roman to prison for life, or lied and let him walk free while destroying herself in the process. She looked at Agent Nakamura in the front row, at the journalists scribbling in their notebooks, at the jury watching her with expressions ranging from sympathy to suspicion. Then she looked back at Roman, and she saw the moment he realized what she was about to do. His eyes widened, just slightly, just enough that she knew he understood. She wasn't going to lie, but she wasn't going to tell the simple truth either. "Mr. Castelli hired me to investigate financial discrepancies in his businesses," she said carefully. "Over the course of 2 months, I found evidence of embezzlement, fraud, and theft. I reported my findings to him, and he took action to address those issues." "What kind of action?" "I don't know. He never told me. That wasn't part of my job." The prosecutor's eyes narrowed. "You never asked what happened to the people you investigated?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I didn't want to know." The courtroom stirred. Whispers spread like wildfire. The judge banged her gavel once. "Order." The prosecutor stepped closer. "Miss Laurent, are you telling this court that you had no knowledge of Mr. Castelli's criminal activities?" "I'm telling this court that I chose not to ask questions I didn't want answers to. I knew Roman Castelli was a powerful man. I knew power like his doesn't come from following rules. But I also knew that the work I was doing was helping him protect legitimate businesses from people who were stealing from them." "Did you know Mr. Castelli ordered the murder of Victoria Chen?" The question landed like a bomb. Seraphine's hands gripped the edge of the witness stand. Her knuckles went white. "No," she said. "I didn't know that until after it happened." "But you suspected." "Suspecting isn't knowing." "Miss Laurent, the FBI recorded a conversation between you and Mr. Castelli where he essentially admitted to having Miss Chen killed. Do you remember that conversation?" "Yes." "And what did he say exactly?" Seraphine closed her eyes, remembered Roman's voice, the way he'd stood at the window looking out at the harbor. "Victoria Chen made her own choices. She chose to threaten you. I simply removed the obstacle." She opened her eyes. "He said Victoria Chen had made choices that put her between me and my freedom. He said he removed the obstacle, but he never explicitly said he killed her. He never said he ordered her death. He implied it, suggested it, but he didn't confess." The prosecutor's jaw tightened. "Are you protecting him?" "No. I'm telling you exactly what happened. Roman Castelli is too smart to confess to murder on a recording. He's too careful. Everything he said could be interpreted multiple ways, and he knew it. But you believe he killed her. What I believe isn't evidence. Miss Laurent, I believe, Seraphine said, her voice rising for the first time, that Victoria Chen died because she threatened to expose both of us. I believe Roman Castelli saw her as a threat to something he'd built over 30 years. And I believe he did what powerful men always do when someone threatens them. He eliminated the threat. But I can't prove any of that. All I can prove is that Victoria Chen contacted me, we met at Castle Island, she threatened me, and 6 hours later she was dead. And you reported this to the FBI. After Roman had already acted. After Victoria was already gone. I reported it to save myself, not to save her. Because by the time I realized what was happening, it was already too late. The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. The prosecutor looked at his notes, looked at the jury, looked back at Seraphine with something that might have been disappointment or might have been understanding. No further questions, he said finally. Roman's defense attorney stood, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen every trick prosecutors tried. Miss Laurent, she said, her voice smooth as silk, you testified that you destroyed your ex-husband Damien Vale's financial empire. Is that correct? Yes. And how did you do that? Seraphine's heart kicked. I gathered evidence of his crimes and reported them to the authorities. How did you gather that evidence? Through investigation. What kind of investigation? Financial forensics, document analysis, following money trails. Did you hack into Mr. Vale's personal accounts? Silence. The defense attorney smiled. Miss Laurent, you're under oath. Yes, Seraphine said quietly. I accessed his accounts without permission. That's illegal, isn't it? Yes. Did you steal documents from his office? Yes. Did you manipulate financial records to make his crimes appear more extensive than they actually were? No. I never manipulated anything. I only documented what was already there. But you did break multiple laws in the process of gathering that evidence. Yes. And the FBI granted you immunity for those crimes in exchange for your testimony against my client. Yes. The defense attorney walked to her table, picked up a document. I have here a copy of your immunity agreement. It states that you are protected from prosecution for any and all crimes committed during your investigation of Damien Vale. But it says nothing about protecting you if you perjure yourself on this stand. Do you understand what perjury is, Miss Laurent? Yes. Good. Then let me ask you this. Did you tell Mr. Castelli about Victoria Chen's threats? Seraphine's mouth went dry. Yes. And what was his response? He said he would handle it. Did he specify how he would handle it? No. Did he ever explicitly tell you he planned to kill her? No. Did he ever ask you to help him kill her? No. So the only evidence you have that Mr. Castelli murdered Victoria Chen is circumstantial, based on timing and implication rather than actual proof. Yes. The defense attorney looked at the jury. No further questions. She sat down. The prosecutor called 3 more witnesses, an FBI forensics expert who testified about the wire Seraphine had worn, a detective who'd investigated Victoria's death, a financial analyst who'd traced some of Roman's more questionable business dealings. But none of it was enough. Without Seraphine's testimony definitively placing Roman at the scene or proving he'd ordered the killing, the case was built on circumstantial evidence and implications, the kind of case that fell apart under scrutiny. By the time the prosecution rested, Seraphine could see it in Agent Nakamura's face. They were going to lose. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Seraphine spent those days in a hotel room 2 blocks from the courthouse, watching news coverage of the trial and wondering what version of hell she'd just condemned herself to. If Roman was acquitted, she'd spent 4 months destroying her conscience for nothing. If he was convicted, she'd be responsible for sending a man to prison who'd seen her when no one else had. Either way, she'd lost. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, her phone rang. Nakamura. Jury's back. Verdict in 30 minutes. Seraphine hung up, got dressed, walked to the courthouse through streets that felt like they belonged to a city she no longer recognized. The courtroom was even more packed than before. Standing room only. Everyone wanted to see how this ended. Roman sat at the defense table looking like he'd barely slept. His suit was still perfect, his face still calm, but there were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there 3 days ago. When Seraphine walked in, he turned. Their eyes met across the room, and something passed between them that was too complicated for words. Recognition. Regret. The understanding that they'd both made choices that had led here, to this moment, where neither of them would walk away whole. All rise. The judge entered. The jury filed in. Seraphine couldn't read their faces. Couldn't tell if they'd decided Roman was guilty or if they'd been convinced by his lawyers that the evidence was too thin to convict. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. The foreman stood. A man in his 50s with kind eyes and a wedding ring worn thin from years of wear. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of racketeering, how do you find? Not guilty. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel. Journalists rushed for the doors. On the charge of money laundering, how do you find? Not guilty. More chaos, more shouting. Seraphine sat frozen in her seat. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, how do you find? The foreman paused, looked at Roman, looked at Seraphine. Not guilty. The courtroom exploded. Roman's defense team celebrated. Prosecutors slammed folders on their table. Agent Nakamura sat with her head in her hands. Roman stood slowly, turned, found Seraphine in the crowd. He didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge her at all. He just looked at her for 5 seconds. 10. Long enough that she could see everything he'd lost written in his eyes. Then he turned and walked out of the courtroom, a free man. Hulk. Seraphine stood outside the courthouse as snow began to fall over Boston. Reporters swarmed Roman on the steps, shouting questions he didn't answer. His lawyers made statements about justice being served and innocent men vindicated. The crowd pressed in from all sides, cameras flashing, voices overlapping into noise. Agent Nakamura appeared beside Seraphine. I'm sorry, Nakamura said. For what? For putting you through this, for making you believe we could actually win. You didn't make me do anything. I chose to testify. And for what? He walked. Victoria Chen's killer is free. And you destroyed your relationship with the only person who actually understood what you were. Seraphine looked at her. Is that what you think Roman was? Someone who understood me? Wasn't he? He understood parts of me, the angry parts, the destructive parts, the parts that had spent so long surviving that I forgot how to actually live. She pulled her coat tighter against the cold, but he didn't understand the part of me that wanted to be better than what I'd become. And maybe that's the part that matters most. Nakamura was quiet for a moment. What will you do now? I don't know. Disappear again, probably. Go somewhere he can't find me. Start over. The immunity deal still holds. You're protected. From prosecution, not from consequences. Seraphine watched Roman climb into a black car, watched the door close, watched the car pull away from the courthouse and disappear into Boston traffic. Some things you can't be protected from. She walked away before Nakamura could respond. 2 weeks later, Seraphine stood in the kitchen of the townhouse in the North End she'd bought before any of this started. She'd come back to pack her things, to close this chapter of her life, and move on to whatever came next. But she'd been standing here for 20 minutes just looking at the empty apartment, trying to remember who she'd been when she first walked through this door. Someone hopeful, maybe. Someone who'd thought destroying Damien meant she was free. She hadn't understood then that freedom was more complicated than winning. A knock at the door made her jump. She wasn't expecting anyone, hadn't told anyone she was here. She opened the door. Roman stood in the hallway. He looked older, thinner, like the trial had carved pieces out of him he couldn't get back. How did you find me? Seraphine asked. The same way I find everything. I paid attention to the places you thought no one was watching. You shouldn't be here. I know. He looked past her into the apartment. Can I come in? She should have said no, should have closed the door in his face, should have called Nakamura and told her that Roman Castelli was violating the terms of his release by contacting a witness. Instead, she stepped aside. Roman walked in slowly, looking around at the bare walls and packed boxes like he was seeing evidence of something he'd already suspected. "You're leaving," he said. "Yes." "Where?" "Does it matter?" "No. I suppose it doesn't." He turned to face her. "I came to say I'm sorry." The words landed wrong, off balance, like he'd never said them before and wasn't quite sure how they were supposed to sound. "For what?" Seraphine asked. "For Victoria Chen. For putting you in a position where you had to choose between protecting yourself and doing what you thought was right. For making you believe that working for me was about justice when it was really just about control. I knew what I was getting into." "Did you?" "Because I don't think either of us knew what this would cost until it was too late to stop paying." Seraphine leaned against the kitchen counter. Her legs felt unsteady. "Why are you really here, Roman?" "Because I wanted you to know that you were right. On the stand. When you said I eliminated Victoria because she threatened something I'd built over 30 years. You were right. I did kill her. I had someone do it for me, which is worse because it means I didn't even have the courage to look her in the eye while I destroyed her life." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know the truth. Because you testified in a way that gave me room to walk free, even though I know it cost you everything to do it. And because I wanted you to understand that the verdict doesn't change what I am. I'm guilty. The jury just couldn't prove it." Seraphine's eyes burned. "You think I protected you on that stand? Didn't you?" "No. I told the truth. The specific, literal, legally accurate truth that you never explicitly confessed, that the evidence was circumstantial, that proving someone did something and knowing they did it are two different things." She pushed off the counter. "I didn't protect you, Roman. I protected the version of justice that still means something when powerful men can buy their way out of consequences." "That's a nice way of saying you let me go." "I let the jury decide based on evidence instead of assumptions. That's how the system is supposed to work." "The system failed." "No. The system worked exactly the way it was designed to work. Which is why people like you and Damien and everyone else who has enough money and enough lawyers can walk free, while people who steal bread to feed their kids go to prison for years." The words came out harder than she meant them, sharper, edged with every ounce of rage and exhaustion she'd been carrying since the trial ended. Roman absorbed them without flinching. "You're right. I know I am. So what are you going to do about it?" "Nothing. There's nothing I can do. I'm just one person. I can't fix a broken system. I can't stop powerful men from hurting people. All I can do is survive and try not to become one of them in the process." "Is that what you think you've become? One of them?" "I don't know what I've become. That's the problem." Roman walked to the window, looked out at the north end spreading below them, all narrow streets and old brick and lives being lived in languages his grandfather would have recognized. "My father told me something before he died," Roman said quietly. "He said that power is just responsibility no one else wants to carry. Every decision you make when you have power hurts someone. The question isn't whether you hurt people, it's who you choose to hurt and why." "You told me that before." "I know, but I don't think I understood what it meant until now." He turned to face her. "I chose to hurt Victoria Chen to protect you. I chose to hurt you by forcing you to testify against me. I chose to hurt everyone who trusted me by building an empire on violence and fear. And I told myself it was necessary, that I was protecting people, that the ends justified the means. And now? Now I know that was a lie. The ends don't justify the means. They just let you sleep at night while other people pay for your choices." Seraphine walked closer, stopped 3 feet from him, close enough to see the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the exhaustion that had settled into his bones like dust. "Why are you really here?" she asked again. Roman looked at her for a long moment. "Because I wanted you to know that you changed me. Not enough. Not in time. But you showed me that there was another way to be powerful, a way that didn't require violence, a way that could actually help people instead of just controlling them. I didn't change anything. You're still the same person you were before you met me. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just starting to realize what I lost by becoming this person in the first place." He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out an envelope, set it on the counter between them. "That's everything. Every piece of evidence you'd need to actually convict me if you wanted to try again. Bank records, recorded conversations, Names of people I've had killed. All of it. Seraphine stared at the envelope like it was a snake. Why? Because you were right about something else, too. Some things you can't be protected from. And I'm tired of running from consequences. If I give this to the FBI, you'll go to prison for the rest of your life. I know. So why give it to me? Because you're the only person I trust to decide whether I deserve that. The words hung between them like a challenge and a surrender all at once. Seraphine picked up the envelope. It was heavier than she expected, filled with years of evidence, years of crimes, years of choices Roman had made that had hurt people who never knew his name. She could give it to Nakamura, could watch Roman get arrested again, could testify at a new trial with real evidence that would actually stick. She could burn it, let Roman walk away, let him live with his guilt instead of his punishment, or she could do something else entirely. I'm keeping this, she said finally. Not to use, not to destroy, just to have, as insurance, as proof, as a reminder that the truth exists even when juries can't find it. Roman nodded slowly. Fair enough. But I'm not giving it to the FBI, not because I'm protecting you, because I'm done being part of a system that only works when convenient. I'm done helping powerful institutions that can't be bothered to do their own work. Then what are you going to do? Seraphine looked at the envelope in her hands, at the weight of Roman's entire criminal empire reduced to paper and ink. I'm going to disappear, really disappear this time. Not to hide, not to run, just to figure out who Seraphine Laurent is supposed to be when she's not destroying people or helping them destroy each other. And if I come looking for you, don't. The word came out flat, final. Roman heard it for what it was, an ending. He walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the knob. Seraphine? Yeah? I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope you find a way to live with what you've done. He smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. I don't think that's possible, but I appreciate the sentiment. Then he left. Seraphine stood alone in the empty apartment, holding an envelope full of evidence that could destroy a man who'd already destroyed himself. She walked to the window, watched Roman emerge from the building and climb into a car that pulled away slowly, disappearing into Boston traffic like he'd never been there at all. Then she set the envelope on fire, watched it burn in the kitchen sink, watched years of evidence turn to ash and smoke, watched the truth disappear the way truth always did when no one was left to care about it. Not because she was protecting Roman, because she was protecting herself from the person she'd become. The person who believed that holding on to someone else's sins somehow made her own more bearable. 3 months later, Seraphine stood on a beach in Northern California, watching the sun set over the Pacific. She'd changed her name again. Not back to Celeste, not to Seraphine, to something new, something that didn't carry the weight of everything she'd been before. She'd bought a small house on the coast with money from her grandfather's trust, started volunteering at a legal aid clinic that helped people navigate systems designed to chew them up, learned to surf badly, adopted a dog who'd been abandoned at a shelter. She didn't think about Damien anymore. She tried not to think about Roman, but late at night, when the house was quiet and the ocean was loud, she sometimes wondered if he'd found a way to live with himself, if he'd changed anything about how he operated, if Victoria Chen's death had meant anything to him beyond the inconvenience of a trial. She'd never know. And maybe that was okay. Maybe not knowing was better than carrying someone else's guilt in addition to her own. Her phone rang. The new one. The one with a number only 3 people had. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Miss Laurent? A woman's voice. Young. Scared. My name is Rebecca Morrison. I got your number from the legal aid clinic. They said you might be able to help me. Help you with what? My husband. He's been stealing from me, from our joint accounts. I have proof. Bank statements, emails, everything. But when I tried to report it, the police said it was a civil matter. They said I needed to handle it through divorce court. Seraphine closed her eyes. How much did he take? $40,000. It's everything we saved for our kids' college fund. Everything we had. And you want to get it back. I want to destroy him the way he destroyed me. I want him to feel what I felt when I realized the person I trusted most in the world had been stealing from me for years. The words were so familiar, they hurt. Seraphine had said almost the exact same thing about Damien once, had felt that same burning need for revenge disguised as justice. And she'd spent the last 6 months learning that revenge didn't actually fix anything. It just created new problems that hurt different people in different ways. "Rebecca," she said quietly, "I can't help you destroy your husband. But they said you were good at this. They said you'd helped other people." "I did. And it ruined my life. It turned me into someone I didn't recognize. Someone who was so focused on winning that I stopped caring about what winning actually cost." "So you're just going to let him get away with it?" "No. I'm going to give you the number of a really good forensic accountant who can help you build a legal case. I'm going to recommend a lawyer who specializes in financial fraud. And I'm going to tell you that the best revenge isn't destroying him. It's building a life so good that what he did to you becomes irrelevant." Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "That's not what I wanted to hear." "I know, but it's what you need to hear. Trust me." She gave Rebecca the numbers, listened to her write them down, wished her luck. After the call ended, Seraphine stood on the beach watching the last of the sunset fade into night. The ocean stretched out forever in front of her, dark, endless, moving according to rules she didn't need to understand to know they were real. She thought about Celeste Arden signing divorce papers in silence. She thought about Seraphine Laurent destroying empires from the inside. She thought about the woman she was now, who didn't have a name that carried weight, but was learning to live with the weight she carried. And she realized that maybe that was enough. Not redemption, not forgiveness, just the quiet understanding that surviving didn't have to mean winning, that freedom didn't have to mean revenge, that being powerful didn't require destroying everyone who'd ever hurt you. Sometimes it just meant walking away. Sometimes it meant choosing to be nobody important in a place where nobody knew your name. Sometimes it meant learning to taste the water in your own life and recognizing when it finally ran clean. She walked back toward her house as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. The dog waited on the porch, tail wagging, happy to see her for no reason except that she'd come home. Inside, the house smelled like salt air and coffee, and the absence of anyone else's expectations. She poured herself a glass of water from the tap. It tasted clean, weightless, honest. Nothing like the metallic taste of the water in Damien's Beacon Hill house. Nothing like the expensive filtered water in Roman's office. Just water that tasted like water. She drank it slowly. Outside, the Pacific crashed against the shore in rhythms older than memory. Inside, Seraphine Laurent, or whatever her name was now, stood in her own kitchen, in her own house, in a life she'd built from the ruins of everything she'd destroyed. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what she'd imagined when she signed those divorce papers and decided to stop surviving. But it was hers. And maybe that was the only victory that mattered, the only one she'd ever really needed, the only one that would last.